Yay! Welcome to day 3. This is awesome. Our third little gathering here. It is so good to see so many of you for a second or a third time. This is totally awesome. Thank you for joining us back again. Today's conversation is going to be a little bit different. And I'm going to be doing most of the lead because I'm not the numbers person. Peter is. I like to pick the colors. And so today's really kind of about the color picking. It is about telling our chapter story. So I'd like to get us started by having you put in chat, what's your chapter good news story? Now, obviously we don't want a book yet, but what is a good news thing? Like if your CEO or a board leader came into you and said, tell me something good about the chapters, what would you begin? What would be the first thing that would come out of your mouth if you're thinking about chapters? I know that when I was leading the PRSA Maryland, if someone, and I did actually have someone from National ask us one point how things were going. And I said, well, let me tell you, we finally got our DEI committee up and running, and we've done 2 incredible events. That's my good news story, how a chapter really can have impact on that conversation. So what's your good news chapter story? Oh, Jessica, that's good news. If you're getting out more rebates, it means they're doing the things that they need to be doing for the most part. That's awesome. Wow, you've had more inquiries, Karen. That is very cool. Yay, Michelle. The town hall idea has been one that you have done so successfully out there in California. Let's celebrate that. Communication and collaboration is healthy. I love that, Mary. Great. Oh, and see, Shelley, that's the testimonial right there. They find their people, and that's great. And yes, I love the passion. How do we tell the story about the passion? Because that doesn't feel very quantifiable, but it is very emotional. It takes it to the heart. And that's what we want to do. All right. You got, oh, Shelley, that is good news. Heading out of the country borders. That is awesome. Okay. You guys keep doing that. And I'm seeing 125% of membership goal in 2021. We have got some serious stories. And that's what we're here today, is how do we unleash those stories to the people that we need to? So I'd like you to do me a favor, show me that you know where the reaction button is right now by giving everybody in all of our chapters a big round of applause. Let me see that round of applause coming from everybody. Awesome. Very, very cool. All right. So obviously you guys have a chapter that you can brag about. But let me just give a thumbs up. Show me that you absolutely are ready to tell a story for something. Show me a thumbs up that you've got a chapter to brag about. Good. All right. This is good. All righty. Very cool. All right. So let's rock and roll. If you've been here the other 2 days, you know the team. If this is your first time in, the team is a combination of these 5 wonderful people, plus Emily, who we've got to get on the slides in the future, and a bunch of other people behind the scenes. But it's all about Billhighway and Mariner, because we want to drive the conversations that help you have the success in the field that your organization and your members need. And so we're delighted to be here. So a quick look at where we've been, and then we will get started on our final journey. So just to get it really clear for us, day 1, we talked about the benchmarking report. And the goal of that was to say, where are we here today? Now, what benchmarking does is it really is very useful in helping us see the challenges, the opportunities, and begin to adjust the services. I like the fact that it shows us or helps us see some opportunities. Now, day 2, though, if we just focus on what happened in the past, we can't get very far in the future. So day 2, as you recall, we said, let's put our sights to the future. We talked about some future trends, and we talked about how you need to connect into that strat plan, because your strat plan is your future focus for your association. Well, when we do that, we are able to identify where we want the chapters to be. So then we tied that together with a conversation around dashboards, because dashboards is how we bring those chapters along that journey from where they are or were based on that benchmarking to where they can be or should be. And we talked about the power of the dashboard as something that not only allows you to measure, but to also celebrate and to make decisions about resources that really make the goals happen. So today, we are going to take that next leap. Let's presume for a moment that you have that dashboard. Let's presume for a moment that you have got the background for a story. Now, let's talk about how we tell that story. Now, one of the reasons when we sat down and said, what are the 3 pillars of this particular conversation? And we said that the chapter storytelling was so important is because if you don't have all the data you want, or if you don't have all the success you want, a compelling story can bring people to the table to create that success. It creates a shared vision, for example, for having meaningful data. It's a shared vision of the power of data. It allows you to continually curate the resources and the support out to the field that'll make a difference. And then, of course, and I think this is the most valuable place because we heard on day 1 and we explored a little bit yesterday that the volunteer muscle is the area of our system that needs the most help. And telling the story allows us to celebrate in a way that brings volunteers in. So that's where we are today. And what I'd love to do is to kick us off is to be able to explore by starting with the recap, the stories we can tell. Then we're going to do a little bit of story time. And then we're going to talk about what are the next steps. So let's jump in to the recap. Now, I think I recognize most of you as having been on the on our, I'm just going to go over to my picture here, my screen here, but give me a thumbs up if you were here for day 1 and 2. So a thumbs up if you were here for both days. Excellent. And a thumbs up after your thumb fades. A thumbs up if you were here for yesterday in particular. Thumbs up for yesterday. Okay. All right. So quite a few of you were. Okay, excellent. So the recap is going to be brief, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for some help, right? Those of you that were here yesterday, I'd like you to light up the chat with what your ahas, takeaways, the things that you want to remember. I'd like you to light up the chat and help me tell everyone the story of what we did yesterday. Okay, so we started our conversation yesterday framing the future, and we talked about 3 deserts. We talked about the data desert, and what we were really saying here, it's a consistent and disturbing theme, frankly. Because we're relying on fragmented or disconnected systems, we don't always know how close they are to meeting their mission, and the mission and the connection to our mission. And we also don't always know the effectiveness of our support, which is what we heard in day 1 when we found out that it's not the number of things that you're doing that are correlating to chapter performance. So we said if we could find that dashboard, it could teach the value of collecting the right data and using it, and it could show the power of data. Then we talked about the volunteer desert. Now, this desert is perhaps the one that is most troubling because our volunteers are a real precious resource, and we tend, unfortunately, to, well, waste some of their time and their very limited energy when it comes to doing a lot of the different kinds of administrative checklist functions that we ask them to do. Don't allow them to focus on the stuff that really creates their passion. And someone said in the chat earlier that you really admired the passion of the volunteer leaders. And so it's up to us to allow them to be able to really live that passion. And so we said, if you use a dashboard, you can move from the checklist to outcome tracking. So you can take that focus, not from how difficult it is to do something, but from the difference that made. And you can help leaders really focus on what matters and less on chasing the to-do list. The third one we talked about was the strategic desert. And I think part of where we wanted to come with with today's conversation is addressing this, the strategic desert. Too much of our time, we said yesterday, was spent in the tactical weeds. And we really need to step back and view our chapters as part of a larger ecosystem. And this is a vibrant ecosystem in which we're working collaboratively to do what? Serve the member needs, move the mission. And we said, if you get the dashboard right, you can show the collective impact of chapters. And then when you craft that story, you create a connection to your key stakeholders around what the chapters are doing and can do, and that we should empower them to do. So Peter walked us through quite a few steps and did some really interesting, I think some really good, interesting examples for us. And I want to just highlight a couple of them as we key into how do we use those in storytelling. Now, he reminded us that if you're going to set up the dashboard, you got to start with what is the role, start with the strategic plan, and what is the role the chapter can and should play. Now, when we use the word chapter, we understand that some of you are completely independent, separately incorporated groups you might call affiliates or associate members or whatever names you are. And then there are those of you that have fully integrated chapters. Regardless, this is an area, this is a channel for you. And so if you are fully integrated, those chapters might be named specifically in your strat plan under one of those pillars. If it's an affiliate arrangement, then they probably are one of your strategies for meeting that. But in all those cases, it doesn't matter, guys. You're going to start with your strat plan and what is the role the local presence fills? How do we then measure that? And the way I like to ask it is, what does success look like when they do that role? Now let's put a number that we can track and measure. And the thing that we have to talk about today, really, is how do we share those measurements? Now, Peter also said to us, you want to make sure you get the right KPIs. And this is so individual to the association, but he did give us 5 things to think about. And he talked about, you want to make sure that whatever it is, it's going to be reliable, valid, that you want, it's going to be actionable. He talked about the importance in number 3, and we're going to get to another slide in just a moment about this. Does my 10 and your 10 equal the same thing, right? Talked about, you want to make sure this is not an onerous task to do, and that it's got to be absolutely transparent if you want people to actually trust it, believe it, and create a relationship around it. So he told us that getting the right KPIs is all about the right data sources. And he did give us 3 options there. He said there's a direct access where you absolutely have access to the data. Maybe all the registration comes through your registration platform, for example. Maybe all the dues come through your AMS, for example. But there's also this opportunity for sampling. What if you had a cohort of chapters that are called your pool, and you get them because they're interested in sharing data and metrics and information, and you get them to feed in to a regular conversation that allows you to have some really good sampling. Maybe it's really going to be down to how it is self-reported by the chapters. But the point that Peter was making, I believe, is really this notion of get the data, get the right data sources, and know the limitations of the data sources if you don't quite have it where you want to be. So he reminded us that is important, and this is the thing I wanted to talk about that I just mentioned a moment ago. He reminded us it's important to get buy-in. And one of the things that we heard from COR, we did a really cool dashboard webinar, I think it was 1.5 years ago, and they shared that the way they got started on selecting their KPIs was by bringing together a task force. So get that feedback, Peter told us, from members and from chapter leaders, and make sure that they see it as achievable. Now, Peter warned us yesterday when he put this particular thing up, but he said, let's take the Sample Association of America as an example of how you might think about your dashboard. Now, what I loved about this is he told us to start right up here with the strategic pillars, right? And he said, every one of us is going to have a set of strategic pillars, set them that they're guiding strat plan, right? And he said, typically there's going to be one around education, generally one around advocacy, and generally one around operational strength. Could be more than these, but these are ones you're going to see most of the time. And then he said, okay, your strategic pillars. What are the primary inputs that get you to the goals that are there? So, and we talked about seminars, workshops, conferences under education, talked about the advocacy work under the advocacy, and obviously the operational strength had to do with leadership. Now, some of you, I know, for example, Camped and a couple of other you in the room actually have an operational strength under that strategic pillar. You've got a specific notation about chapters being one of those channels. So we said, okay, if these are the primary inputs, measuring them may not get you where you want. So you really want to look at what are the outcomes you can get from that. And that's where he talked about participation and satisfaction scores. And then he talked about, well, those are intermediary. So you should be able to look at a number of ultimate outcomes. And these ultimate outcomes are going to lead to the big one, which is recruitment, retention, and market penetration. And he asked us to take a look in a journey in which he talked about, let's just talk about one of these pillars, okay? So what was really cool about looking at one particular pillar is it gets us to focus and begin to tell a story about our chapters. So in this particular case, when we talk about the strategic pillar of education, there's a good, reasonable, I'm going to assume, there's a good, reasonable expectation that you're going to be looking at the chapters to fulfill as a channel for education, and that you're probably going to ask them to do that through seminars and workshops, right? So Peter said to us, okay, your primary inputs, but what are your intermediate and your ultimate outcomes? And we talked about registration and satisfaction, and we talked about the CEUs and the certificates that are offered, right? And he reminded us that you want to make sure that we're measuring things that that aren't just because they're easy to count, but because they really do count. And that may take us from saying, many of us will go, you have to have 8 educational events. And he was suggesting, well, test that theory, because maybe it's the number of CEUs and the number of certifications, because that tells you that you're actually getting a well-qualified workforce. And so maybe if you ask for, I want you to have 8 events, is not the same thing as maybe 3 events that hit that goal down there. And of course, he reminded us it's the right blend of metrics. And so for another association, this dashboard may be saying, we understand that there's a rhythm, or there's a number of different kinds of topics that we feel really have to be done in a given year. So maybe there's some kind of a blend. So I bring all of this up because this shows the power of having the data. And then we can begin to craft this into a story. So we're going to come back to this example in just a moment. But I want to pause us for a moment. And I wanted to get some folks, I'm love to, anybody that wants to jump off of mute or use chat. If a dashboard can become a way to have a strategic conversation, what are some of the strategic topics, what element is a strategic conversation for you? So if you had this dashboard, how might that change your conversation? And Luke is asking, so other people please chime in. I'm curious of actual examples of what other associations are measuring. So I think Luke is asking a great question. So also in chat, answer, if you're measuring something, what is it that you're measuring? What is it that you're measuring? One of the things with one client right now is we're taking a look at the membership equation, right? So you don't have to join a chapter. How many of our members are actually joining a chapter? And when I look at the lifetime value of that membership, does it tend to be greater if I belong to both the chapter and the national? Or is it not affected by that? So I'm looking for those kinds of things of how do I enrich the story around the membership conversation? Heather is measuring student membership growth, which is a great indicator, right? A leading indicator of the potential of growing the profession itself. So I know that NTMA, for example, they really look to their states to have and achieve workforce development goals. How many people are you bringing in to learn more about and train for their profession? So Catherine is talking about service hours per member. That's one way to show engagement. Absolutely. I've seen a number of associations do that, where they calculate not based on how many events, but how many hours of education or connections are members getting there. And they're looking at, and again, here's the thing, we can go into, I'm going to really encourage you to take a look at that broader webinar. But the cool thing is when you measure the right thing, then you drive the chapters to doing that. And then you drive the strategic conversation, both with the chapter leaders and with the C-suite, when you can show that there's a connection there. So like Eva is saying, the conversion from student to early career professional could also be the conversion building on that from early career professional to mid-career. If you're saying if you've got that data, imagine this, you're sitting there with your CEO and your CFO and you're fighting for some additional dollars, and you say, well, did I show you the impact on how chapters are supporting our strategic pillar on bringing new people in, right? So there are ways that you can use this in a strategic conversation. And I love what Michelle put in, because it gets at this notion of sustainability of the chapters. How many consecutive years are volunteers serving on the board? That's a metric. We tend to ask, do you have all of your positions filled? Okay, good. And you move on. Well, if they're filled by the same people that filled them 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or conversely, if the same person who was president back in the day became president and now is becoming president again, that's going to tell you a little bit about how your system is working. Okay. And that also lets you, we talked a little bit about the volunteer driver yesterday, and it's important that we recognize we have to have an urgency around changing volunteer systems, right? You're going to change volunteer systems, create the urgency, get the C-suite and the chapter leaders engaged in that conversation when you show them how it can turn those numbers. Oh, Michelle, I love that. You track 5 red flags. So if you wouldn't mind sharing those in chat, that would be awesome, because that I think would really help. It would really enrich the conversation that Luke got us started on here. Excellent. Let me take us into this notion of the dashboard's given you some numbers, it's showing you some progress. How do you then turn this into a story? How do you turn this into a story? So let me start by saying that I believe that we have 3 story options that are emerging from all of these. And I like what Michelle, and I just want to lift up what Michelle said with 5 red flags, because if the story might have to be, I'm going to talk about good stories, but the story might have to be that there's a problem, right? And here's the problem, right? So while we're going to focus on positive stories, understand that the storytelling to the right audience with the right focus is going to help you a bunch of ways. Anyway, I think we've got a big picture story we can tell. That's the ROI impact of all chapters, of the chapter system, right? That's the big, beautiful, this is what the chapters are doing, how they plug into our strat plan. I think we've got a more narrow picture around theme or a specific initiative. How does the chapter, and I love the conversation around the conversion conversation, right? From student to new professional, from new professional to mid-career, that conversion from the non-accredited to the accredited, right? The credentialing. Those are key initiatives that we have, and how do the chapters contribute to that, right? But then I think we also have, and sometimes we miss this opportunity, the winning plays. What I mean by the winning plays, I'm talking about those little successes, small successes, one-up successes, bright spots. One of the things that CAMP is going to be doing, I just happen to have a lot of conversations with Michelle, and I love the work that she's doing. So I just want to shout out. She's doing a session on the last day of her conference, and it's going to be all about the bright spots. What have you done? It's sharing those cool bright spots. HSMA, if you guys don't know, Jenny over there. Jenny is just a powerhouse of a CRP. Last year, her awards program, she asked everybody to send in just what was their bright news. She had all of these chapters weighing in on the slide deck, and then she unveiled the awards, and everybody who submitted something got an award. Then she took that slide deck and she gave it to the CEO and she gave it to the staff, and she said, guys, look at this. And they were all just a bunch of, well, I would say just a really cool bunch of winning plays, right? So we do have winning plays, and I think it's important for us to use those. So let me ask this question. I think we've all got some plays, and we're going to ask you some, but how successful have you been communicating your chapter's why to volunteers, members, to execs, to staff? How successful have you been communicating your well? So give me either a reaction like, yeah, Peggy, we're doing that, or I haven't been successful. And then maybe sure, share it in chat, or if you've got a cool story to share it off mute. And Michelle, my heart goes out to you. Math is hard. That's hard for me too. This is a group of friends. We can admit that, right? Oh, okay, Cassandra, I got it. All right. So sharing the chapter why has been a little bit of a challenge. I take it. Anybody would put their thumb up? Okay. All right. That's all right. That's all right. That's why we're here, right? That's why we are here. Okay. Let me do a couple of polls so we can tease out some things here. All right. Poll number 1. And let me go to poll number 1. Here we go. Who do you share your chapter story with? So I'm thinking here, do we mostly share it back to chapters? Do we share it with some or all staff? Do we do some kind of a report to the board? Maybe we just have a page on our website that says, oh, this is what chapters do. If there's something that we haven't said here, tell me that in chat, share with us in chat. So, and you know, this is not scientific. So whatever really is going to resonates with you. They're a little vague, but just trying to get a sense if you're sharing your there's no all of the above option. Oh, is there? Oh, it's a single choice. Oh, I'm sorry, Brianna. We meant to do that a multiple choice, but we weren't paying attention. And that is why it takes a third person on the team, and we only had 2 people. And I love Sarah. My bad. Oh, Sarah, like you were the only one, right? No worries. The first 3. So chapters, eternal staff, and board. Beautiful. Let's see. A lot of you do the first 3. Okay, this is great. All right. So yeah, just do that in chat. Just say, you know, I do the first 3, or I do 1 and 2. Oh, Eva, I like that. I have a chapter relations committee that I share all my worries and successes. Ah, nice, Luke. I like that. Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, good. So you guys keep telling this. You get the idea. What I'm looking for, if any of you have got a page or something that's up there that's kind of constant, and you can grab that link and share it in chat, that would be great. We'd like to see how we are telling the story. Okay, let me show you that. Obviously, that was easy. Most people are doing it mostly to the chapters, and yeah, that's good, right? Let's see if we did the next poll right. We probably didn't. We did single choice again. So I'm going to change the question. What is the story you tell the most often? What is the story you tell the most often? Is it basically just the basics? We have chapters, check out the link. Maybe it is stats. We tend to just share the member counts, the number of events, Maybe we actually we're constantly talking impact. Maybe, oh, I need to launch this. Maybe it's something else altogether. So what's the main story you wind up telling? Just the basics, the stats, impact, or other. I love that, Brianna. Is that our chapters make our mission and vision of the organization come to life, changing lives all over the country. That is a great tagline. Neat and great. So Lisa Marie does best practices and successes. Okay, wonderful. Nice. We also share the why. And Catherine, do you have an example of that? Is there a link on your website or something that you can share? I think everybody's really interested in seeing how we are. Yeah, we're gonna get the next one set up right. Oh my gosh, Luke, this is great. Thank you. Everybody see in chat, Luke has put a ACS YouTube channel with chapter successes. That's great. See, guys, we can learn from each other. So please grab those links, bring those stories right to the chat, bring those stories right to us right now so that we can do that. So I love it. So what I'm showing is that many of you are doing some of the impact or the stats, which is great. And so I want to see some of those in chat. That is excellent. All right. Let's see. Now I'm going to ask you, the next one is, how do you share the story? Did I, okay, before I launch it, I'm going to get the thumbs up from Sarah. She's fixing it because she is a fixer on the fly. She's a regular CRP. So let me tell you, when the next one comes up, it's going to be, how do you share your story? And I'm going to be asking, do you do it like, website? Do you use chapter communications training events? Do you use member publications, social media, board reports? So go ahead here and tell me, where do you share your story? Oh, Barbara, that is cool. Oh my gosh, Barbara, that sounds really cool. All right, lots of people pulling in here now. Thank you, Sarah, for being a winner. I wasn't specific on these, and you just fixed this one, and we love you. Thank you. It's a team, guys. It's a team. All right, great. I'm seeing lots of cool things, and give it a couple more seconds here. Lots of chapter communication training events. It's natural for us to share our story back to chapters. We feel really good about that, and it makes sense. The question I have for us, is that limiting us? Is that keeping us from getting the same kind of buy-in because we spend more time telling the chapters how great they are to each other and less time telling the C-suite and the board? Here we go. So I do like the board reports. So in the board reports, tell me what it is that, is it a chapter report that's part of the board reports? Is it part of the member engagement story? Just give us a little bit of intel on your chat on that. Help us understand how we could maybe change the way we're reporting to the board. If it's member publications, do you have an example? Can you share a little bit more with us? All right. So we've got some good examples here that we can build on as we continue this conversation. So I want to give you a couple of things to think about as you're looking at, how do I take some of my good news stories as good news and turn them into stories? And most storytellers would say that there's 4 kind of steps that you want to go through. And the 4 steps that they would do, and I'm going to just do this real quickly for us, just to give us kind of a framework. The steps really are, okay, hang on one second. Let me pull this over. The steps really are about identifying the clear focus. So it's kind of like setting the parameters, right? It's making sure that you have a clear sense of where the story has to go, and it's not too complicated. So you think about, why is this story being told? At the end of the day, what do I want to have happen by this story, right? You're saying, when and where is this story taking place? What's the framework for this story? Who are the people in the story? What are they trying to achieve? And maybe this is a story about overcoming a challenge facing, for example, the members in that particular area. Get real clear on the focus. Then be authentic. Don't make stuff up. Don't try to fool yourself. And actually, most stories, it is the less elaborate they are, the more engaging they are. So be really genuine. Have a clear outcome. The clear outcome is, well, it leaves something, right? It leaves something for the listener. So many cases, the way we're telling a story is maybe to the membership at large. What do you want them to do with this? What do you want them to learn? How do you want them to act? So know what that is before you start writing the story. Do you want the CEO, for example, to allow you to innovate a chapter training? Do you want your chief information officer to take a look at a new technology solution? If that's it, then let's learn how to tell the story that does that. And the fourth thing that I really love is this notion of getting members involved. If you want to do an emotional connection with whoever you're telling this story to, it's really important that you pull them in, you get them involved, you create people like them as roles in the story. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I wanted to give that as kind of just a general framework. So I said 3 potential stories. The first one, I believe, is the big picture, right? It's the impact of the chapter system on member value and the association strat plan. One way of doing this is to calculate the ROI. Now, when we calculate the ROI, what we're doing is we're telling the story of how the chapters contribute value in economic terms to the association. Now, we did a whole webinar on the ROI valuation matrix, which we can share that link. It goes into great more detail. And in fact, we talk about essentially 11 common channels. Now, we could spend the entire time, but you have that webinar. So what I want to do is I want us to focus in on 4 of those channels, because it allows you to see 4 different ways of calculating the value of the contribution. So the first one is thinking of the chapters in terms of a distribution channel. The way you're going to value this distribution channel is the direct value of that. And then that's going to allow you to track the profit and the income. So remember, we talked about the CE conversation, the education. So there's probably 2 ways that this could work. So if you take a look at the we have a goal around getting a certain number of educational programs out the door, and the chapters produce a number of those, and they're getting those out the door, and they're now having CEUs awarded and or registration fees. We can calculate that in terms of a profit and income. Let's say they're reselling your stuff. Let's say that they are actually hosting one of your meetings. This is even a more direct thing. If they're the host for one of your national webinars or in-person events, and you are netting a profit on that, it would be direct value. It could be that you look at them as a communications channel. Now, the communications channel could be where they're delivering marketing communication messages that are important. You could price, so you would take a look at the price of the service, right? And that in turn would calculate money saved on that service. So you might look, for example, if there is, this could be tied to advocacy, for example. If they're carrying the water on getting a message out there, and they're getting members to maybe come back to your website to sign a petition, to be counted, to come to association day. The effort that they're doing, the placements that they're giving you to get that message to their people, particularly if they're local only members, is actually money saved. It's like you're getting a pro bono PR. Okay, so one of the associations that we talk to, they their chapters will oftentimes do in-house ads for the National Association. So those are ads you're not paying for. There's a service, there's a saving right there. So the third way that we can value it is we can think about pricing the volunteer hours. Pricing the volunteer hours. So in a listening channel, and you're tapping into the volunteers at the local level to give you important information, intel that helps you be able to, for example, have an effective advocacy, right? Or develop a new product or a service. You could track the number of hours put in that by those volunteers and come up with a calculation for that. So whereas in the communication channel, you might be saying, well, if I had a PR firm that I was paying to get these words out and the chapter is doing it, I've saved that PR firm. Here you're saying I could be having staff go do this job, but instead I'm going to tap into volunteers that are giving me and giving this information back to me, or testing this product and giving me feedback. Then it's the cost of those volunteers. Now, and I love it. The channel is so helpful when telling it's very helpful when telling the chapter story to the C-suite, because it helps you put some economic value to this. And the last one is an indirect value. So we started the distribution channel, whereas if they sell something on your behalf, you track the profit and the income. If they're doing a service that you now save money on having to do, that PR firm, for example, you can track how much money you saved. If it's a listening channel and the volunteers are lifting the weight for you, you can track the value of that free staff hours. Here, obviously, this is more indirect. It's a little fuzzier, but in terms of telling the story, this could be an important way for you to be able to craft the story. Let's say, for example, training and mentoring next gen. The tracking of the indirect value could be how you're tracking the increase in participation. So I'm working with an organization right now that has a leadership lyceum. And this leadership lyceum is really focused on the next gen. They want to bring the emerging leaders into it. Here's the interesting thing. The participants in this, and by the way, this is a steep price event, right? The participants in this are nominated by, are supported by the state associations. So that training and mentoring of the next gen, one of the key elements is this particular training program, which gets them face-to-face with the national organization. It's coming, most of those leads, because of the way they've set it up, are coming from the state association. You can track an increase in participation in that kind of event. And that is part of the indirect value of having a robust, supportive, collaborative chapter system. So there are many other challenges, channels you can talk about. I think a big one that people talk about a lot is advocacy, obviously. I think that the other one that we sometimes don't maybe look at and calculate as, because of the data issues, is the member acquisition. So one organization we worked with was tracking, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, they were tracking the impact of the chapter on lifetime value of their members. Some of you in this room you're either a tripartite or you have a required membership. And so there is selling of those memberships at the local level. So there's all of these different ways that we can put an economic value to it. So I know Wes is in the room, so Wes can blush when I show this next thing, but I love it. So how does this turn into a story? So this is from Wraps. So hope you don't mind me sharing this, Wes. I think Wes was in here. I thought I saw him. There he is. I want to share these two because the power of, if you know what the chapters are doing, you can tell the story in rich terms. So as I look at this, I want you to, I'm going to get my little spotlight here so you can see it. So over here, oh, let's go. This over here is they did a visualization project to take a look at creating a new chapter model. And they had a graphic artist come in and captured the conversation. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because they left this on the wall in their main area of their office. So everybody who came in saw the story of the chapter. They saw the story of the whole change of the chapters. But look at this, all these cool things. They serve the needs of the local community. They keep the education levels up. They do education. They focus on different topics. I mean, the whole story, this is a beautiful image. And there's I think it's 4 panels. And it tells the story, whether you are a board member coming in there, a staff member coming in there, a member coming in there for one of their programming, you get a chance to see the impact. Then they created this wonderful mailer. It was intended to thank their volunteers, but look down here. They put on here, they have 17, at this time, 17 RAPS chapters that held in 1 year, 44 events that connected 1,465 people to that educational opportunity. That's showing the power of the chapter. Let me give you another example. And those of you who did, may have seen this already because we showed this in an earlier webinar, but back in the day, in the midst of COVID-19, there was most of the AGC, this is the general contractors, most of them had to find a way to pivot and be responsive to their members. The clever thing that the chapter staff there did was they videoed and they put together this wonderful video. And as you can see from the description, the title of this was The Association That Cares. And it's talked about in the response to the threat of COVID-19, chapters took immediate action. And they told these stories. Now, they showed this at their annual conference. They put this on their YouTube, and we've got a link that we can share with you so that you can go ahead and see it on yourself. This was it was an amazing opportunity for them to sing from the rooftops how their chapters made a tremendous difference in their members' lives. True impact. Now, I like this one because it also leads us into story type number 2. But before we do that, what I'd love to see you all is go ahead. Do any of you have an ROI or a big picture impact that your chapters make? What would your story look like? Anybody want to share? How might you give this big story of your chapter system? Anybody?
For us, we are the Hispanic Society of STEM, and with an overwhelming amount of 50% of Hispanics not finishing their STEM degrees, our chapters are helping, decrease that number. So people are staying in, getting their degrees, and changing the lifeline of their family legacy.
That is so cool. That is very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And see, that's impactful, isn't that? Very impactful. So I'm going to give you a moment here. Just like Brianne, she came up and she said that. Now, whether she'd been thinking about this, whether she had, actually written this down yet, who knows? I'm going to pause right here. Get a piece of paper out. Okay. Get a piece of paper out and write down real quickly 2 or 3 things that are like that you think your chapter system does that has an impact on the whole organization. Go ahead. Okay, so now you have a starting list. Let's get some more stories on that piece of paper. Now, AGC was talking about this particular impact in the COVID. It fits really nicely, though, into our story too, which is a theme or a key initiative. Sometimes it's easiest. Remember, we talked about focus as a first step. Sometimes it's easiest for us to get a story together if we think focus down, we think very specifically on a particular initiative that we have, or maybe a particular theme. In their case, the theme was COVID. But there are other themes that are alive and well and connect to our strat plan that our chapters are really feeding into, right? So it could be a legislative victory. It could be the COVID response. It could be the collective CE offerings. So just that small example from RAPS, for example, is just talking about the number of people that have been connected to that. And Brianna's story was very similar. So what I love about this is think about something that's really top of mind in your association's mind, whether it's on the CEO, it's on the board list, and say, okay, how are our chapters making a difference there? Let me go collect the stories. Now, if I had a dashboard, it probably was a metric and I could see that. But let's pretend you don't have a dashboard, right? Let's just say you don't have that. You can still listen intentionally and pull together those stories and tell that particular story. So it begins with connecting to the strategic initiative, collecting the ways they're supporting that, aggregating that. When you collect the stories, don't say, did you do something? And then just listen to how eloquent they are about how wonderful there is. Ask them, how many people did you touch? How many, maybe if it's a public awareness campaign, how many media exposures did you get? How many people called up? How many responses did you get? How many shares did you get? Get as many numbers as you can, right? Then maybe it's a video like AGC, maybe it's an infographic like RAPS did, maybe it's a blog post like APT did. Get that story out there. So what I love about this APTA, and I don't know if we've got anybody on the call from APTA, but if we do, go ahead and give us a thumbs up and everybody applaud them. I love this, this post. So this post, now I realize that to a certain degree, this makes good sense. Like, I don't think their advocacy people had to think very hard to do this, but sometimes we have to instigate it. But check this out. They did the APTA 2021 State House Roundup, and the whole thing is sharing how the legislation, very important legislation in this very important year, got moved along and moved through. Now, here's the very cool thing about this. They didn't just share the wins. They gave the atta-girl, atta-boy to the almosts and the keep moving to the pending. So if you went on this particular, and actually, thank you, Sarah, for putting that link up. If you looked at this, you'll see that it tells the story about not only the wins, but it's honoring the effort that states made. Now, what's really cool about this is that I, as a member, ran into that, right? I, as a member, ran into that. And now you're going, oh, I didn't know there was I didn't know that my state group, all of a sudden you've connected with the member. This was important to me. You've shown me that a state did something. You showed me that collectively made a huge difference. You have invigorated the power just through these stories. You know, ASAE has the power of A. I think we need to have the power of C. Am I right? Give me a thumbs up. The power of C. So I think that we have lots of opportunities for us to have these kinds of themes. So who else has got a theme that they've played with? Anybody else? Anybody want to share a theme that they've played with? All right. time for you to reflect again. This is what I want you to do. Remember, you started that list and you've got a couple of things down on that list from the what would be the ROI. I want you now to put the big thing that says themes. If nothing else, what are the strategic themes that you believe your chapters are addressing right now? What are the strategic initiatives association is doing that you know chapters are doing something with? Write those down, and then your homework will be to find out what they're doing, right? So write those down. Take a quiet moment here, reflect, make that connection. Okay. So you've got a couple more things now to look at on your list. You've got the ROI, what's the big stories? Now you've got a couple of initiatives and you're going to find those the way, and you're going to tell that story. All right. So big theme, all those winning plays. I think that this is, well, we've got some amazing stories. We got some amazing stories happening out there in the field. And I think that we spend a lot of time sharing them with the chapters. How much time do we share sharing them with the board? How much time do we spend sharing them with other staff? You know, the staff that are saying, oh, I can't help you get that technology fixed, or I can't help you with that communication issue for your chapters. I got busy. There's more important things. Yeah, we'll take a look at what our chapters are doing. Let me share you 3 things, right? So this is where I believe winning plays, or another way of looking at these, are bright spots and innovation. So I say that the best place to start with this is to take a look at something that a chapter has done that has helped. Well, you know, there was a challenge and they overcame it, right? It's a bright spot is something that's going right in a field where things aren't necessarily going right. We did a Sarah, very good. we did a session at CEX and a follow-up series of posts on the Billhighway blog, sharing examples of bright spots, but also sharing an entire system for figuring out for discovering and replicating them. We are going to continue to be in a time of change, and bright spots are going to be really helpful for us to get everybody to see how the system is robust and is sustainable. And by sharing this, we're sharing the power of chapters to staff, to CEO, to board, to key stakeholders, to members, right? So I bet in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and put another poll up. And have you seen bright spots in your chapters? Maybe it's a twist on an innovation. Maybe it's something that was really replicable and you perhaps did replicate it in other chapters. Maybe it is Maybe it is something that happened even before COVID, and it's something that now would be really relevant. So I totally love this. Many, 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 many of you have seen some bright spots. So light up the chat right now. Tell us what some of those bright spots are that you've seen. Look at that. Sarah, lots of bright spots. All right, light up the chat. Let's share the bright spots that you're seeing. Oh my gosh. I love that. Fundraising on Twitch. Excellent. Keep sharing. Keep sharing. And I'm going to get us thinking about it by sharing a couple of bright spots with you guys. So some of you may have seen this story already, but this is an example of not only having a bright spot, and replicating it, but making sure the word got out. So this comes from NACE, Maine, and if you you can watch the YouTube video on it. We've got some other cool examples from specialevents.com, for example, that actually covered it. So what is really neat about this particular story, and the reason why I like to share this story, is because not only did a small group of people start working together, they created this postpone, don't cancel, but they also re-energized the chapter simply by showing the members that people cared about them, that they were not alone, and building a really robust community. They also were able to begin to build money to be able to hire a lobbyist to have a more active advocacy program, but they got a seat at the table with the governor, to get the special events and the meetings and events industry involved as part of the blueprint of reopening Maine. So it was just a phenomenal program. What I thought was really cool was how NACE not only replicated it, shared this with other chapters so they could have the same formula book, but specialevents.com covered it, which then became, obviously, it built awareness for the NACE brand. It built awareness for NACE Maine. It built awareness for the profession. Part of the goal of this, by the way, was not only to get people to not cancel, to postpone, but to get the mindset of people who connect with caterers and special event people to understand that we're an important business in this local economy, and we're suffering too. And not that we don't appreciate we're all suffering, but see us as people. And I think that was the power of this campaign, was really wonderful, because it was outward facing and inward facing, and NACE did a good job of making sure that it got the story all around. So I think that oftentimes we've got bright spots or stories of innovation that we don't really leverage. And what I want to do right now is give you some examples of how we could really leverage these bright spots, and in leveraging these bright spots, begin to get the story told. So I'm just going to share three, and there's plenty more here, but these three come to mind. They're ones that we have talked about either in our trickle up or chapters as influencers. So you've seen some of these. We picked up a brand new one to add to this list too. But the first one is a legislative victory that happened with NAOP's Florida group. The 21 legislative election was one of the most, in fact, the most successful for the Florida group. It brought in more people, it engaged more members, and had a significant legislative victories. Now, I don't know, and I will have to admit I didn't reach out to NAOP to ask, but this is another example of how, we could say, hey, Florida members, did you hear what your state did? We could go to make sure that I'm sure their advocacy staff knew it, but did their membership staff know, right? Did their events staff know? Because this could be a story, a session idea, right? This next one is PMI's military program. It's called military program operation quality for hire. And what I loved about this is that this actually came out of their Tampa, Florida chapter, who had a large military base and a large military community, and knew that as people were matriculating out of the military back into civilian life, they were obviously, they often had skill sets that were underappreciated, even maybe by themselves, right? And many of these have to do with project management, logistics management, materials management, that kind of handling process stuff that's really important. And so realizing that the folks before they entered civilian life, right, could get access to really good training that would allow them to make that transition and into the project management community. It was so successful in Florida that PMI helped it to be replicated across their system. It's one of their really cool programs. I don't know if someone from PMI is on here. If so, give us a shout and everybody applaud them, because now you can go on PMI's website and you can see all about this particular program, but it came up through the chapters. So once a program becomes baked into an organization, does your staff forget that it came up through a chapter? The story could be one of our most successful things that is creating an incredible commitment to us on an initiative started in a chapter. The power of C, the power of C. Our storytelling is helping our staff, is helping our CEO, is helping our board see the power of C. Let me give you one more here. NTMA's Utah chapter. Now, they shared this at a Bright Spot session that I was facilitating for their chapter leadership conference last year. And the reason why I give this as a shout out is because NTMA had to, because it was largely an in-person event and because of all the things that were happening, NTMA had to sunset for the year. It's going to come back again, but they're not able to have their emerging leaders conference, right? So in the absence of the emerging leaders conference, Utah said, hold a second, we still have emerging leaders. we have a workforce development initiative. We can build one here. And they built and ran a very successful emerging leaders conference. Now, it's really interesting because I've seen a number of organizations where they have chapters that have some of the most robust emerging leaders. National Apartment Association has lyceums at the local level, the state level, right? I'm pretty sure it's NAOP has some amazing emerging leaders programs in some of their chapters. So if we're saying we have an initiative to develop the next gen, are we making sure that the education folks, that the CEO, that the board knows how the chapters are feeding into that? Do we have stats? How many graduates did you have? How many people that graduated 5 years ago are now fully in the profession? Do we know the names of the graduates? And now we can show how many of them are on our boards or on our committees or on our ad hoc volunteering. This is telling the story of the power of your chapters. Now, there are other examples I think that we could come up with. Who else has got an example here of something that you know that is happening at the chapter level that now your aha is, hold a second, I think I should play that a little bit differently to my staff. I'm going to give you a second. Think back. We did that poll. Almost every one of you said you've seen a bright spot. Jot that down. Build this list of stories, right? Jot that down here. My innovation stories, my bright spots. And then go see if it becomes a story. I'm going to give you just a moment here to pause. Build your list. Okay, guys. Hopefully, you've got a list now of sure shooting stories, or you've got a list of stories that could be. And the PMI link isn't working. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. We'll get you another one. I know they're still doing it. So you got that list. So let me just give you a suggestion for making the case for chapters, how you might begin to frame this. I want you to think about in terms of putting the numbers together, right? I want you to think about this idea of pulling the numbers together that will help you make that case, right? Registration counts, events that connected with members, the number of people that they brought through the Emerging Leader Program. I want you to help them with advocacy wins. Retention numbers may be what you're doing if it's a bigger one. I want you to pull those numbers together. And I want you, in doing that, I want you to think in terms of what are the intangibles? Like, what is the insight we gain through a chapter activities? What's the insight gained about members through chapters? Like, if chapters can give you some sense of how people are connecting, how do you build that into your own recruitment and retention programs? And also think about progress on critical issues. Think about if we need to make a shift on a membership model, for example, and you're able to get the chapters to be able to sell that in a compelling way, or to support that, or to come along for the ride as you do that. Think about those intangibles, write them down. When you see them, write them down. If you use OneNote, set up a page that says, making the case, and just grab those when you see them and put them over there. I was just reading Barbara's comment. Event select. We have an event select by a chapter called What Works, provides opportunities to share best practices on a theme that is a global challenge, with the chapters carrying this out locally. This is the kind of cool stuff. So how do you make sure you share that conversation? And then I want you to think about, in your spare time, here I've got a story. What's going to be the best way for me to do it? Do I want to do a video like AGC did? Just get, and you know what, you could get your chapter leader on a Zoom call. You could put a couple of Zoom calls, and you could pull them together and you can create the video. Maybe though it's an infographic, Canva, right? Maybe you're just going to, do the numbers there. Just tell us that story, craft that story. And then I know we do a good job. Yeah, I think we do a good job telling our chapters, but let's report to management. Create a dashboard that's visual. Maybe it's a high level report. Maybe there's something you do on a monthly basis and you say, bright news from chapters. And you're just sharing this with the key staff and letting the staff know. Maybe you put together an annual report for your chapters, an annual report that highlights what the chapters have done last year. I mean, we're collecting annual reports, right? And sometimes we share back some results, or they turn into the awards. Have you ever done an annual report? Hey, based on our chapters, do you know that blah, 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 and blah, 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 and X, Y, Z, and here, CEO, here it is. And I've highlighted the things I really want you to pay attention to, right? So creating that story. I'm going to stop my slide share, bring it back to us. And I want to have a conversation, and I want to start the conversation with what story is it that you're trying to tell? And is there some way we can help you? So anybody want to go on camera and say, Peggy, here's what we're trying to do. And let's have this subject matter experts, this mind trust, the brain trust that you have right in front of you. Let's see if we can build a chapter story. Anybody want to raise their hand and try to, and be a willing suspect here? Oh, wow. You're still writing notes. You're so amazed. You're not sure. All right. Nope, no problems. So let me ask a different question. What questions on your mind about telling a story? What questions on your mind now? What haven't we answered that we could explore right now? We've got a few minutes left. Man, we've done a great job. Oh, there is a request. Barbara, did you see that they would love you to share the link to what works? Okay, good. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Our goal is to give you some food for thought, and hopefully we've done that. So let me bring my slides right back up again. I have a few closing slides, and then I'm going to put them down again because I really want us to have the opportunity to take any final questions. Hang on one second while I get myself organized here, because all right, there we go. All right. Part of the journey that we'd hoped we could take you all on today and yesterday and the day before was a journey where you would be able to empower yourselves. And that's really what this is about. It's empowering you to be the best advocate that you can be for chapters. And sometimes that's having the hard conversations about the fact that chapters aren't connecting in the way they should to the mission. Sometimes it's having the hard conversations around saying that you think you are, but you're not getting done. But a lot of time it's about advocating for them by helping to tell the story, helping to get the metrics right so that we can show the potential, if not the current progress, right? It's really about this notion of how do I advocate? How do I know enough about the strategic plan and about the organization's initiatives, enough about the needs of the members that I can begin to pull all of this together in a way that is meaningful, okay? That's the journey that we wanted to put you on today and the 2 days before this. That is hopefully where we leave you. So what I'd love to do is have you just for a moment, just take a quiet moment. And what's your number one? What are you going to do next? What's your number one? What are you going to do next? I'm going to give you just a quiet moment to do that. Okay, I just happened to see the question coming through on chat. So I just wrote down 3 things in response. Someone said, how do we get these stories? How do we figure this out? So my first go-to is, of course, I'm going to say to you, data. If you have shared data, you will know the stories. I love it. We did a webinar, and I don't know, Sarah, if you can do that link on the last minute, but we did a webinar in which we were talking about, is it IPA? But we were showing some screen grabs because they had a membership push with their chapters, and you were able to show us on the dashboard that those memberships, the membership things. I'll talk with you afterwards. I'll get the link to you. When you have the data, the picture emerges, and when that picture emerges, you have the story to tell, and then you just drill down from where the data came. I know we don't all have the data, so 2 more suggestions. I was talking to a CRP last week, and she was talking about the fact that she blocks time. And I think someone else mentioned this on day 1 as well. Similarly, she blocks time to pick up the phone and call chapters. Call chapters, guys. Call them. When you call them, you will find the stories. I'm sorry that they don't do it on email. I'm sorry that they don't do it when you incentivize them. Remember, this is just like a narrow part of their job as being a volunteer. Call them, have a conversation. You will find these stories. How do you think NACE found it? I mean, part of these is call. And the third thing is, forget asking them, ask members. Do a poll out to members. What's something that happened recently that you really like that we did? They're going to point to chapters some of the time. Then you pick up the chapter and you say, hey, did you know that Susie mentioned this? Tell me more about it. All of a sudden, you're asking for more about it than trying to pull out what it is. Okay, so don't always assume the chapters are going to be there for you to give you the information. Call them and ask members if you don't have the data. Good. I love that, Cassandra. Figure out what we want to show leadership. That's right. And get in the minds of leadership. What does leadership think is important? Show them how the chapters make that happen. And we got it. All right. Keep those things coming. I love this conversation, and I think we could have another big conversation about it. But we drew you all in here with the promise of the 2022 chapter benchmarking report, which will be available for you next week. You're going to get not only, but wait, there's more. You're going to get slide decks. You're going to get video links. You're going to get a worksheet to follow through on that dashboard build. You are going to get resources, and you're going to get the love of Billhighway and Mariner. And I've been doing all the talking, but I'm used to that, and I'm all good with that. So I want to do right now, I'm just going to go ahead and end the slideshow, and I'm going to find out if Peter or Mark from Billhighway or Sarah want to say anything. And remember that if you don't say anything, I'll just keep talking.
Peggy, I'm going to say something, and I'm going to say thank you. And this has been extraordinary, as we've all come to experience from you every time that we get together. So I just love that we do this. And I want to talk about bright spots just for 15, 20 seconds if I can. And this is going to be kind of a self-serving Billhighway message. But if you think about Billhighway, we do 2 main things. Number one, we're a solution that helps your chapters perform better in every aspect of how they run their business, right? So that alone ought to be enough. We significantly increase their performance in how they serve members. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. But while we do that, our solution organically captures all this data that we're all talking about. And then you, as the headquarters folks, have visibility into that, and you see their bright spots. So for example, you'll know how many events each one of your chapters is having. You'll know the average number of events your chapters have, which are the bright spots and which are the low spots, right? So you'll know our average chapter gets 42% of its attendees attending their events. But we've got these chapters that are only getting 24 and these chapters that are getting 78. What's the difference? You'll know, oh, you know what? Our average chapter gets 10% of their annual revenue from sponsorships, but we've got these over here that are getting over 50%. What are they doing differently? Whatever, all that type of data, right? You'll know which of your members haven't attended any chapter event, and I'm making up a number, the last 186 days. And you'll draw some correlations that say, you know what, if a member doesn't attend a chapter event, they are more likely not to renew next year. And so we're proactively identifying them so somebody can reach out and right. So we're changing the role of a CRP from someone that's almost like a bill collector, because you're calling and saying, hey, I need this report from you, right? We haven't gotten it yet. And they're dodging your calls, to someone who's a mentor that's using all this data to help your chapters perform better. And so if at any point you want more information on any of that, talk to Sarah, reach out, we'll spend a half an hour with you. We'll tell you the story, and we'd love to help you do that. So we're working, if any of you use association analytics, right? So we're working right now with Mark Lowry and his team, because if you're using an analytics tool that's connected to your AMS, right, you're only getting the data that's in your AMS, and all this important data that's happening all over your chapter ecosystem isn't making into your analytics, right? And that's kind of a major thing, right? So we're working to make sure now that if you're using a group like that, we can get all that chapter data in, so we can really make intelligent decisions based upon the whole association, not just part of it. But anyway, so I just wanted to say, Peggy, thank you. I think this has been amazing.
Great, awesome. Peter, do you want to say anything?
What he said.
I love you, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, guys, we've had so
I
much
love you
fun
too,
today
Mark.
and yesterday and the day before. Anything else anybody wants to add for the good of this group and this community, which rocks? And it's the power of C, leverage chapters. Woohoo! Y'all be good now.
Stay well.